Mic check. All right, tonight's vlog is going to center around the topic of whether or whether not indie comic artists should work with indie comic book writers. And I'll give you, I guess, some insight on what my experience has been and whether or whether not I think you, the potential indie comic book artist, should go that route. Now, back before COVID began, I was streaming and building an online audience. At that point, it would have been 2018, 2019. I was at the height of my illustration ability and the best I had ever been, and was super confident in myself enough to get online and try to show the world what I was made of. So I took that route and started finding some very minimal success. But it's like anything, you stay consistent with it. And before you know it, people are starting to hang out with you in your streams. People are starting to hire you to do work for them or commission you to do something somewhere. Also, I've had, an extensive past as a freelance artist. So I had some friends in the industry and people I went to college with that I'd stayed in touch with over the years that had kind of kept me in business, so to speak. So along came one consistent viewer on my stream. I was on Twitch, in case you're wondering, and this follower, he kind of greased me up in a sense, and he showed me his work, and he was just starting as an indie comic writer. And I read one of his scripts that he was looking for an artist for, and I was pretty impressed. The guy was about 10 years younger than me, and I was pretty impressed with his ability to put a script together and, you know, paint a picture of a fictional world. And, he kept pushing me to join him and be the artist on this project. Like any indie artist I'd worked, or with any indie writer I had worked with prior, that, they have to be confident in their work in order to get somebody to commit to it. Some of them sometimes, like I've mentioned in other vlogs, they have an ego about them, or they think their script is the next big piece of work that's going to, blow everything out of the pond, essentially. So, like I said, he kind of pushed me to work with him, and after reading his script, I thought, well, hell, I'm not doing anything else that's super consequential to whether or not I become successful or something as a streamer. It was pretty stagnant for a while. So I decided at that point that I would work with him, and it would be the best course of action to get my work, my comic book work, in front of more eyes. And I guess back then I thought handling that as a team was the approach with most ease, where I could just focus on the art, which I was hired to do line art. There would be a colorist involved who would work on my line art after after I had completed my portion of the book. And then, the indie writer that I was working with, he basically handled all the social media and whatnot. Obviously, I would continue to promote myself through my social media platforms, but the role essentially would be minimized, and the weight of the project would be kind of dispersed evenly, if you will. So you go and you commit to a project like this, and this was my first time ever doing um, line art for a comic book, intended only for line art. Everything I'd done prior to it, I was the only artist involved, and whether there was coloring or some kind of rendering that came after, I usually handled that. So this time I was part of a pipeline process, um, and my sole role was to design the characters, um, and the line art on the pages. It was a 24-page issue comic, so we went ahead and we did it. And I think I finished it in just under 3.5 months. Took me like 3 solid months, and I did it all traditionally on 11 by 17 Bristol. Turned out really good. I was super proud of myself. You know, the cover and 24 pages of comic book story. So after it had been finished, we shortly thereafter handed that work off to the colorist, and she took about another month and a half to get her portion of the project done. Once that was completed, I went off to a letterer that the indie writer had in his repertoire there. He had worked on other projects and kind of brought that letterer along. I don't know if we had an editor for that first issue him and I did together, but we ended up wrapping it up only a couple months after I had finished my responsibility to the project. Then this was in the midst of COVID when all that was happening. Um, then I then I moved. I moved from Canada to the States, and my life became pretty tumultuous. And I gave up the streaming, and a lot of my social media presence kind of dropped off, and it was hard to juggle what was going on in my personal life, trying to adjust in the States, getting my social security number, having to wait for that. A bunch of family stuff was going down, and a lot of it was negative and strenuous on me. So I dropped off on a lot of these projects, and things fell by the wayside. But we didn't end up releasing the comic that we had done, and the whole intent of doing it was to launch a Kickstarter campaign. Well, we didn't end up doing that until the better part of 2 years later. It was 2021 when I moved to the States. It was 2021 when I finished working on my responsibility to this first issue of this comic book series. And I think it was summer 2023, after I had moved to the Midwest, that we finally launched it as a Kickstarter. So, you know, the months that led up to launching it on the Kickstarter meant getting back on social media, which I really only had Instagram at the time and a Facebook following. So, you know, promoting it there, getting very little traction. I at the time I had about 1,000 followers, or just about, on Instagram, and even to this day, that large number doesn't grant me a lot of attention. You know, I remember posting almost daily back in the 2020, 2021 era, and getting, you know, the best I would get was 50 likes per post, very little engagement. And, you know, of that 1,000 follower, I'm only getting, you know, the same 30 to 50 people engaging with my content. So that was always discouraging. And then inevitably, when we did launch the Kickstarter for this first issue, it just didn't really do great. We definitely hit our goal on Kickstarter. So, by all means, and we surpassed our goal, but not by much. So by technicality, we were a success, but the money I made from it was very little. And there's more to the story too. In a nutshell, I decided that the writer and we would do 50-50. So whatever profits we made would go to pay for the colorist, the production of the book, and what have you. And whatever we ended up with after a Kickstarter was complete, we would split those profits 50-50. So again, my intention was never really to make money from this thing. I knew that there was never a lot of money in the initial phases anyway. It was more, I wanted to put into practice getting the hang of cranking out a 24-page comic book issue in a timely fashion. I wanted to I wanted to get that under my belt. So I continued to work with him with the same arrangement, 50-50 split. I did a tie-in issue for another series that he had going on. It was a sci-fi comic. He had a background character in his ongoing series that he wanted to do a spin-off issue for. So him and I did that. It was a fun experience. And I did a cover for him somewhere in the vein of 2023, I think it was. So, he kept me busy. I was trying to figure out my life and where my next steps were going to be now that I was a new American citizen. And my big focus back then was just working the jobs that I had, saving as much money as possible. I went from living with my grandmother early 2022 and 2023 to moving out to the Midwest with my mother, where her and I split an apartment for a while. And really, I just saved a shit ton of money to set me up for where I am now, and 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 I furthered my education to get the career that I have now in civil engineering. So financially, I'm doing fine now. Getting out here and trying to juggle the little responsibility I had to these comic projects was pretty null. I knew that during 2022 to 2024 ish, living with my grandmother for a while and then living with my mother for a while, um, it was near impossible to find enough time to get back to my craft of comic book illustration. I did some work with another guy when I was living I lived on the East Coast in New York for the first couple years when I moved to the States. So I worked with a guy from Toronto. We did a short together. That turned out really great. Um, and I just had him pay me a page rate for that. So I kept at it, but it just, that particular writer, he didn't really promote it very well. I don't even think the guy had social media. Him and I were kind of both in the same boat. We just wanted to cut our teeth in the world of comics and start producing stuff just to get a feel for it, see if that's where we wanted to continue. And he, like me now, he had a career, so he wasn't doing it for financial gain by any measure. He just had a burning passion to make comic books, and that's kind of why we linked up. But the first writer I was initially talking about in this video, him and we continued our friendship, and as time went on, I started bugging him for the second script for the second issue because I hadn't done any work in a while, and I was financially sound and back on my feet again around 2024, early 2024. So finally, he got that script to me, and I had been asking for that script for a while. But finally, he got on his ass and sat down and finished it, sent it over to me, and I started right away. Mind you, I put all the hard work in the first issue, designing the characters and the world. So I just jumped into issue 2, and I had that done in probably the same amount of time, probably 3-4 months. That issue I did the line art for, and I did it digitally this time. So, like I said, about 3 to 4 months, had a day job that was pretty hectic, saving money. I had a girlfriend at the time, so balancing that into the schedule. Anyway, I finished in a timely fashion, just like the last issue, sent the line art out to the colorist who got halfway through the book and then decided to quit. So then we had to find another colorist to not only continue the book, but try to match the first half of the book, the way that that colorist who quit on us, um, we wanted the second colorist to, obviously lay their touch to the book, but try to match what the other colorist had done. So that's typically not something you ask of a colorist. Anyhow, where I'm going with this is, after all was said and done, it ended up being an entire another year and a half before we launched that second issue on Kickstarter, to which again I had to get back a couple months prior before the launch to start hyping it up. And I'd started a TikTok at that point, so I was trying to get some traction there, still promoting on Instagram, and just, no traction because, and I blame myself, because the lack of consistency of posting and, building up that following of people who really want to engage with my content. So the time came and went where we launched this second issue, of our book on Kickstarter, and again, technically, we succeeded, surpassing our funding goal, but not by very much. And I made very little in the 50-50 profits that were left over after everyone else got paid. And there were even some errors in the writing that were not spotted by the editor, to which I had spotted prior to printing. And then once seeing these things go to print, and those mistakes not being caught, I was very frustrated. So the point of this video is to kind of give you a backstory of all that kind of bullshit that you'll go through, um, which has led me to where I am now, and where I had kind of started off when I initially met this guy back in 2019, streaming on Twitch. Back at that time, I had scripts that I had been sitting on. I just didn't have the confidence to commit to them. I would basically write a first issue, have an idea, write a first issue, and then I'd, stick it in a folder and forget about it. And then I'd do it for another idea that I'd come up with, and then get an issue out and write it, and then stick it in a folder and just forget about it. And my problem was I wasn't committing to these ideas, these independent, or these intellectual properties that I was creating. So after all this experience and time wasted, essentially, um, I'm at a juncture in my life where I'm going all in as a solo. I'm writing, I'm illustrating now. I'm gonna color all my own work. I'm going to produce all my own work. I'm running all the social media platforms by myself. I'm doing the Kickstarter campaign and a Shopify website. I'm doing it all. Started my own publishing label. I bought the rights to it, so I own dopecomics.com. It is in the works at this very moment. I have yet to publish it from my editor's stance as I create the website. But I just want full ownership. And the whole point of this video is to tell and send the message out to, indie comic book artists that, you as a comic book artist alone have the potential to write your own stories. Doing your artwork in the first part as a sequential artist in comics, you have the ability to tell someone else's story through panels, through your characters, through the world that you build around them, through their body language, through the expressions that you give them, through the action that you take them through. It's a skill you develop as you do one comic after another, and I don't think that's something you should take for granted. Now, definitely work with a indie writer when you're first cutting your teeth, because it gives you an idea of just what goes into a single issue comic book, let alone a comic book series, or something on a larger scale like a graphic novel. But where I've landed here at the tender age of 40, I can't see myself ever working with an independent writer again, or even a professional writer for that matter. I would rather, as hard as it is, and now that I have a career, of course, it's hard to balance these things, but I would rather put the time in with the free time I have, and I do have a lot of free time, no girlfriend, no kids, very little to do in this town. And I'm a introvert and I stay to myself. So putting the time into social media to gain an audience um, takes a long time, but doing it pushes you to constantly keep creating new content. Luckily for me, I've got a backlog, so I can pump content out on a daily, across the board, across multiple platforms, so that I've always got something to show. And then I'm constantly creating new art. So um, this new IP that I've been working on, I've I have the first four issues completely written out. I have the first issue completely done, illustrated, colored, obviously written. And I do have a pre-launch Kickstarter up for it. And I would say, to anyone listening that this may provide value to, is that take it upon yourself, give yourself some credit that yes, you can do this. You can alleviate yourself the hassle of having to split the profits and split the responsibility with all these other people involved. Um, there's another element to it too that I never liked, and it's uh, seeing your independent writer posting your artwork on their social media and getting more likes than you get when you post it on your social media. Yeah, of course they're going to credit you, but how often do people stumbling upon their website or their social media post rather? How often do they see the artist who's involved and go and follow them? I don't know, because I don't get a lot of traction that way. Um, my writer that I had worked with, he has since hit the jackpot with another artist on another IP that he has created, and it's an NSFW. And suffice it to say, the titties and the sexy female characters in that IP are garnering quite the audience. And he's got probably over 600 people that come back for every issue that they release, every campaign that follows the last. And they're making a good chunk of coin. So this is also part and parcel that what has motivated me to do my own project. Um, my my comic, Simpy the Cotton Wiener, is an NSFW too. It's not highly predicated on the sexual aspect, but it does have titties. If you like titties, there are titties in it. But the sexual aspect is more of the impact and aids to the joke of and the satire of the book that I've created. So that's why I decided to go for that low hanging fruit. I I see that it's popular and I see that it sells, and at this point in my life, I really don't care anymore. I'm going to do what people want to pay for. And if it's titties, then titties is what I'll give them, because I can draw titties really well. So yeah, should you work with an indie comic writer? Of course, get your experience up, but don't think that they are going to provide you with some breaking the door down opportunity into the industry. They're looking out for themselves at the end of the day, which is what you should be doing as an independent artist. Um, I would say that across the board for anything, really try to just take full control of your craft and try to expand on that the best you can, and handle it the best you can. All these people will try to get in on your shit. It's incredible. Since day one in my art career, the people that have tried to hire me for pennies or nothing at all, offering me exposure, offering me a chance to get my work in front of eyes, all day long with this bullshit. These fucking leeches is what I view them as at this point. Even on TikTok now, as I slowly am gaining a good following on TikTok, I get random people that want to do do work for, have me do work for them, have me design their characters, have me work on their comic book, read their script. uh Fucking bullshit. Bullshit. It's all bullshit. I had this chick the other day come and ask me if she could partner with me. She has an agency, and it's free apparently. And I'm thinking, what do you mean it's free? Why would you do anything? Why would you offer a service and not expect anything in return? Like, and I asked her, like, all due respect, lady, like, what do you get out of this if what you're offering is free? You're trying to help me to do this, that, and the other thing on TikTok. And she couldn't give me an answer. I think she sensed the tone in my, which I prefaced with, I prefaced my response answer with all due respect, but, and emphasized all due respect, but she had no answer for my rebuttal. She had nothing to come back with as to explain to me why or how she, would provide a service without some kind of a fee. So I'm just saying, these people they're gonna tack onto you if they see that you have some talent, and that should be your message to yourself from the universe, that you clearly have what it takes to do something that has monetary value, and you owe it to yourself to take as much time as you need to figure out how you're going to turn that into a small business. I have a career, so financially I'm doing very well, and I'm so grateful for it, because now, being in this small town with very little interaction with people around here, I don't have a friend group, I don't have a wife, I don't have kids. I'm able to come home at the end of the day, and I love my job, by the way. My day job is absolutely fantastic. It gives me all the fulfillment in the world. Doing something for my community, working with a great team of guys. We get shit done. They love me there and appreciate my role, and my duty. That I put in. I can't fucking talk tonight. I'm getting tired, but I'm appreciated there. So when I come home, I have nothing but free time. And when I don't feel like completely decompressing, playing a video game or watching a movie or reading or something, then I have all the time in the world to commit to a comic book. And that's basically what I did. I started my career early 2025. Actually, I started right at the end of 2024 here in the Midwest. And about this time last year, late March, April, that's when I sat down and finally committed to writing my story. And I took pretty much all spring 2025 to get it done. Had the full series, or at least the first 4 issues of it, fully written from start to finish. Um, Issues 1 through 4, had them done. So it can be done. You just have to work on your time management, get comfortable with the uncomfortable, and embrace the suck, and just sit down with it. And I mean, the tools we have between Google and Chat GPT, if there's something you need to research on the fly and get a quick answer so that you can come up with the next cool part of your story, easy enough to do. Also, I use Chat GPT and Copilot to help me formulate a lot of my notes. I could sit there all day and just type, 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 and I'd be kind of looking at a garbled mess by the end of the day, and nothing was really organized. But if I just put the time into semi-organizing it, chronologically, how the story was supposed to go, and then feed the AI the backstory of the characters and what I wanted the allegory for the story to be and what I wanted the symbolism to be. As long as I fed it that and my script, it would give me something back that was just formulated and ordered so much better than I could do. Well, not that I couldn't do it myself. It's just it saved me so much time. What would take me an extra 5 hours to 10 hours to another week of work to divide it into my free time, I was able to get done in mere seconds, feeding it to the Copilot or Chat GPT. So you have tools at your disposal that you can use for these things that can get you a lot further in the writing process. And and yeah, like I said, in 2025, I had the script completely all fleshed out by the time June rolled around. And by the time June rolled around, that's what I did. I dedicated my summer last year to um, drawing the first issue. And I had it not only illustrated with the line art, but I had it fully colored by the time November rolled around. Now, I did make a few mistakes and I still have some polishing up to do for issue one, but it's in good enough of a condition that I can show preview pages. And you know i I just I can't stress enough to an indie comic artist to take the reins and just say screw the indie writer. They can work with budding artists that are coming out of college and that want to cut their teeth. They can work with those people. And here's another thing, if it's any consolation. But like I've seen a lot of very talented artists like myself work with some of these similar indie artists as well. And although they chose to go a different route where I did the 50-50 split with my independent writer, they chose to take a page rate. So, they got paid for their efforts. But in the end, here's the big thing. In the end, they get paid for their artwork, right? So I'm the indie writer. I pay you for your services, your page rate. So let's say I pay you $3,000 to do me a 24-page comic book and a cover. All right, now you're paid. But now the indie writer, I own your artwork and I have your artwork on my book that I wrote, and I can sell your artwork with my name on it because I wrote it. It's my idea. I can sell that for eternity. And that's exactly what's happening now, with my indie writer that I worked with. He has his own website. He has all these books. He looks bigger than life. His social media looks bigger than life. He's got all these books, but he doesn't draw. So I mean, really think about that. It's just like in the comic book industry where the big names are Marvel, DC, Image, and whatnot. If you look back to the 90s, there was a group of guys. They formed Image, right? And they formed Top Cow Comics. They were Marvel and DC artists who were fed up with these writers and this whole production company is stealing their intellectual property. That's why when I was coming up, Todd McFarlane and Spawn, not the greatest story, not the greatest art, but the idea behind it, a guy taking the reins of his own creation, his own IP. Stan Lee wasn't an artist. He didn't draw Spider-Man. I believe it was a guy called Ditko who created the look of Spider-Man. You know, you're an artist, guys. You're a comic book artist. You're a designer. You're the brains behind the image, behind the thing that captivates people. All day in the comic book industry, they'll talk about how good a cover needs to be in order to sell it to somebody. And it's the same thing with novels. You got a very catchy cover, it's going to help draw the eye to it. That's what we do. Us artists, that's where our specialty is we're captivating an audience based off of one single image, enough for them to pick it up, read through it, and buy that fucking thing, right? We are the reason it has monetary value. There's something in that illustration, that original unique piece of artwork that we add to it. So this is my big stress point, is take the control back. Eke out a path in your life, chip away at it however you may. Find the time where you have it. Make the efforts to hone in and write your own script and work off that. I've done it now with my book Simpy, and it's so fulfilling. I can't express to you enough. I had an idea. It started from sitting down sketching some random weird sexy shit one day, and out of the ether I plucked an idea, and then I thought that's fucking funny, and I'm just gonna expand on it and keep expanding on it, and it turned into an idea very quickly that turned into a concept for a first issue that turned into a grander concept for a comic book series. And the more time I spend on it, after working through issue one, after doing all the promo art now in the phase that I'm in, it only sparks more ideas for how I could either keep the story going or whatever. And it's obviously inspired the need to start my own publishing label and keep the train rolling. It's I can't stress it enough. Just take ownership of your own shit and be the man. Be the single thing that gets it done. Figure that out. There's nothing more degrading than seeing a writer taking credit, whether it's usually indirect. It's an indirect way of taking credit for your art, but at the end of the day, when you see their when you see their social media with your artwork on it, with more likes than your artwork gets when you post it on your social media, you don't want to feel like that. Trust me, it's not fucking good for the soul whatsoever. So, so yeah, take it for what it is. I'm going to touch on this again, probably with a little more caffeine in my system and maybe a little more umph in my step, because I feel like I'm coming off kind of timid. And I won't lie, these kinds of things actually really piss me off. That's part of the motivation why I decided I'm never going to work with an indie writer again. I mean, hell, now that I have a career, I don't really feel like ever getting commissioned to do stuff again. It'll be on my terms, and only if I really want to do it. Doesn't matter. I'm beyond exposure. I'm beyond all that shit. What I care about now is, uh, you know, furnishing an organic audience that likes me, likes my artwork, and who really motivated me was that Papa Meat character. He's on YouTube. He used to be an animator for a show on Adult Swim. I I fucking love that guy, and he just does his own shit, ripping on Hollywood, and I mean, Papa Meat is the shit. And if 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 I have any luck, I'll end up like him. And I definitely want to lean more into the funny, since my book Simpy the Cotton Wiener is a comedy, and I do have a pretty dry sense of humor. I want to lean more into that. So, writing jokes and finding ways to be funny. I mean, I've got a I don't take things very seriously. This world we live in is fucking ridiculous. So why should I? Anyway, I've gone on long enough. This is approaching 40 minutes. So if you think any of this has anything to do with you, please share. I'd love to hear your comments. Really, not for the algorithm. I I feel like more artists need to hear this. This is something I could have used years ago when I started writing scripts, and I should have stuck to them. Thankfully, I still have that folder with all those scripts on the back burner. So after Simpy, there's always another one. There's always another one loaded and ready to fire out. So anyway, thanks for stopping by. I'm Lupo. I'm the owner and founder of Dope Comics, and my book is Simpy the Cotton Wiener. It is in pre-launch on Kickstarter, and you can find the link. I'm going to leave it below if you want to go and check that out. If you're interested, please follow along, and you'll be notified for when it is inevitably launched. So Have a great day, and I hope my warning finds you well. Have a good night.